Good evening, and welcome to the Gutter. Everybody ends up here eventually, and tonight we are joined by Justin Sweet. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tonight is this is going to be a lot of fun, man. When we initially talked about you coming on the Gutter, your excitement was I could feel it right through the DM, man. You were just so thrilled to be on the fourth episode of this groundbreaking show, whose viewership is measured in the ones. The
Nice.
So we talked a little bit about your book, Chrome Dog, and
Mhm.
some of the influences that led you into where you are now. And one of the things you dropped was an appreciation by some of the characters that were created by Dave Cockrum. So what I thought was, man, this would be a great opportunity for both of us to kind of have a fun little journey through Dave Cockrum's career. And when you talk about, I guess, do you have any input on that before we kind of dig in and start getting into the meat here?
I mean, outside of just being enthusiastic for those like Dark Phoenix saga, the X Men and the things that were going on. I mean, I know Dave Cockrum kind of like contributed, obviously, with the character designs, but yeah, man, freaking X Men, love them.
Yeah, no, and we're gonna get to that because he's instrumental in that. But first, if we could, you know what, we're gonna come over here and say something to the chat. We've got D-Wag in the chat saying "bow," so good to
Bow.
see you, D-Wag. We got Nefarious. He was one of my special guests on episode 2.
What's up, Neff?
Always good to see Neff.
Oh yeah.
We've got Odin Dasco. Odin Dasco,
Yes,
friend
Odin.
friend of the show and a future guest. We actually have to. I've got to get my people have to get in touch with his people, and then we got to figure out when we can have the singing driving cowboy on.
Nice.
And we've
Oh,
got Broken Compass Comics. Always a pleasure to see you, sir.
sweet.
And of course, my comic talk brother, the host of the show, Jeremy Eisenfire. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for
Lord,
lending me the keys to your comic channel tonight.
Lord Crackhead himself.
Indeed. So let's jump back. We're going to hop in the Wayback Machine with Mr. Sherman and Peabody, and we're going to go to October of 1979. And October 1979 is a footnote in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's towards the end of the 70s. And if anybody's watched the previous 3 episodes of this show, they are well aware of the fact that there's only 2 things that we really despise on this show: communists and the 1970s. So prior to the MCU, Iron Man was a C-list book. I mean, we can all admit that. You go to any shop today, and you're going to find just long boxes of Iron Man issues that nobody really wants, other than Camel Moon. Um, there were some really good, solid stories that adorned the pages of those books, but nothing was ever really groundbreaking or exceptional. Um, at least until issue 127. And issue 127 was done by Bob Layton, Dave Michelin, and John Romita Jr., and started really featured heavily in the spiral of Tony Stark's drive towards severe alcoholism. And that story led to a bunch of negative behaviors. And eventually, what happens is he comes home and he's showing some floozy while he's hammered, all this classified material, and Jarvis he checks him lightly, and Tony snaps. And so we get this beautiful page where Jarvis submits his resignation letter. Now, the page in and of itself isn't that important. What is important is actually the resignation letter, because through whatever you want to call it, and according to Leighton and Michelin, they had no involvement in this. This resignation letter is a slightly edited version of Dave Cockrum's resignation letter from Marvel.
Oh wow.
And how it ever ended up in the book, number one, it was a absolute mystery as to whether or not it was or it wasn't until issue 130, when Michelin confirmed it in the letters column. And he tried to explain kind of what happened, but he kind of fumbles it and he doesn't really give the details. But he did state that it really upset him that this happened, and it really upset Dave Cockrum so much that he continued to work with Marvel as a freelancer. So apparently, it pissed him off, but the check's still cleared.
Mm.
But yeah, so it's this issue 127. If you can ever find it of Iron Man, I'll show the cover again. Has a slightly edited version of Dave Cockrum's resignation letter from official Marvel duties in it. But who was Dave? I mean, how does he go from? And here's the thing. Let me start here. So Dave was a Navy brat's son. He bounced around from military base to military base with the only real stability in his life. Wasn't friends, it was family and comic books.
Mm.
And he was a fan of two books in particular. And this shows his fantastic taste. I mean, out of everything that this guy could have possibly picked to really cite as his two real heavy influences, he picks Fawcett's Captain Marvel, who we now know as Shazam, and Mac Raboy's Captain Marvel Jr., which these are great Golden Age books. They're just a lot of fun. They're really goofy if you look at them now. If you're a fan of like Frank Miller's Dark Knight and Watchmen, you're gonna look at these and go, well, these are just goofy. But if you're a comic fan, you look at these and these are just fun. This is the kind of stuff that you really only find like today in like Alterna. And really the comic book fun, the funny pages on Sundays. It's just fun. It's unadulterated fun, and it's geared towards not all ages. It's geared towards kids. And they're fun. They're written at a specific level. They're paced really well. The art kind of really helps you guide through. And it's when people talk about, hey, you'll hear people from the Golden Age talk about, I grew up learning how to read from comics and learned art from comics. These are the books they're talking about. And that's the environment that Dave came up in. And those were two things that really heavily influenced him. And he went on to do a whole bunch of stuff. But in the Silver Age, as he's kind of coming of age, he starts writing letters in, and he becomes what is known in fandom as I just had it here. Yes, there we go. He becomes very heavily published. A lot of his letters see publication in comics. And so you're from Amazing Spider-Man to Fantastic Four. His letter hackdom, for lack of a better word, he actually meets his future wife by exchanging letters back and forth with other people that are in the letter column. It's a fantastic story that we're not going to talk about.
Neat.
But yeah, so he goes and he becomes cited in the letter columns. He loves this. He loves comics, and then similar to you, my friend, because I understand you are a U.S. military veteran.
Correct.
Cockrum, after he graduates high school, he joins the Navy, and for 6 years he fights for our country and the flag in the Vietnam War. And he comes back. And he kind of bounces around. He works for Warren Publishing for a period of time. He works for DC for a little bit. And then he comes over and he starts working for Marvel. And when he's at Marvel, he does something. He does a couple of things, and then he gets put on a team. And the team that he gets put on is they're going to rejuvenate and reboot the X-Men. And the X-Men have been suffering in reprints for 40 issues, 50 issues. It's been a long time. They're just republishing the same stories over and over again. And they put together a team. But in order to reboot the story, the writer, this crazy kid named Chris Claremont, wants to do something different, really wants to spice it up. And he wants the old team to be in danger. So Professor X has to arrange a new team and go out and get them and rescue them. And he creates an entirely new team of X-Men. So Dave Cockrum is singly responsible for he's cited as the designer, but I mean, obviously the writers are involved too, but he created Storm, Nightcrawler, Wolverine's alter ego of Logan, Colossus, and the Starjammers, as well as Thunderbird, who also we won't talk about because really comic YouTube doesn't need to talk about Thunderbird. But so one of those in particular, Justin, was a character that you mentioned to me, and that was Colossus. Do you want to talk a little bit about why Colossus is important to you?
So, so Colossus was always kind of a um, I don't know. Like I saw him as, I mean, and this may ruffle some feathers, but I always saw him as the most heroic of the X Men. Of the new X Men, besides Storm, of course. Like those two had a certain like moral compass, and it felt like Colossus was like this big, hulking like big brother, almost. I mean, I don't want to say so apple pie like Superman, but he was definitely very um, what's the word? Noble, and he served as a pretty good foil for the gruffness of Wolverine. But but really, it also comes down to just his look. And when I was kind of, when Chrome Dog was starting to kind of like form in my head, I had certain like things, images and whatnot. And one of the first ones was definitely the chrome skin kind of transformation that Colossus, does. Um,
Gotcha. And famously, I mean, one of the things when you think of Colossus, it's the unitard kind of look with the uniform.
yeah,
But yet when he's just Peter, it's he's got pants. And that one of the things that Cockrum had said was they didn't like bare legs, so they gave him pants, and then they just explained it off with the excellent comic book dumb explanation of, well, it's just a molecular uniform, and when he gets his skin, the pants disappear,
the
which is completely ridiculous, but it works. It works so well, and that's the great part about comics because man, the rule of cool always applies. We do have
100%.
some late joiners. They will be noted in the Book of Grudges. We have Jason Sandberg.
Hey,
Congratulations again on the continued success of your book, Jupiter, and thank you, as always, for being the debut guest here on the Gutter.
very
We
cool.
have Alex VRB, Chrome Dog!
Thanks, Alex. Love it.
And Alex also chimes in that Colossus is a man's man. He can take a pounding.
No
And
boy.
I think we just need to let that one resonate for a minute before we move on. All right, moving on. so Cockrum's work with really with the X-Men, he kind of did the same thing with Legion of Superheroes from like in the mid 70s for over at DC. But that to me, when you look at what he did with DC with the Legion of Superheroes, it was kind of like a warm-up act for what he does when you're talking about the X-Men. He's really renowned after he does this with the X-Men as becoming a really great costume designer.
Mm.
He's the one that came up with the yellow and blue style for Wolverine's uniform. Um, he does he comes up with the flowing cape and the kind of the hairstyle for Storm. Nightcrawler, which was actually a character that he created when he was in the Navy, with both the personality and the stylings being a very troubled person as far as and almost angelic in his personality, but a devil in his appearance. Was something that he really loved playing with, and it just goes to show, and you see that throughout the rest of Cockrum's work, that he enjoyed that the bifurcation, the contrast of putting the character up front as corollary and contrary to their appearance, and it really comes across, and that's why these resonate so much. And Alex VRB says, while you're discussing X-Men, you could be showing off pictures of Psylocke's ass. I'm just saying. Well, it's my show, so I won't be doing that. Mainly because I didn't cut any of those, because Dave Cockrum had nothing to do with Psylocke. What he did have something to do though was this. And if you ever get a chance, and you find this for about $15 to $25, I highly recommend picking it up. And it's the Life and Art of Dave Cockrum. It's a fantastic book by Glenn Cognan.
Hmm.
It goes through kind of his entire history, and sadly, Cockrum did pass away in 2014. In fact, there's a couple videos from the 2015 Heroes Con. I thought about cutting him a little bit and showing him, but he's really in bad shape. He's on oxygen, and I didn't really feel like that was a positive light to show him in.
Yeah.
So I chose not to do that. But so kind of moving forward, so famously he does this with X-Men, and then much like a lot of people, specifically some of the artists that were previously mentioned, he has a contrast or a conflict with Marvel editorial at the time, who was famously Jim Shooter, and so he resigns in 1979. How that letter ever ended up in Iron Man 127, we'll never know, since his problem was with the editor. But he resigns, and he still does contract work for Marvel. He just doesn't really work with Shooter very much. He's working with sub editors and individual creative teams on the book. He goes back to DC. He starts doing a lot of independent work. Probably his most notable being the Soul Searchers and Company, Peter David's book, in the pseudo indie scene. If you've never checked it out, highly recommend it. It's a fun read.
Huh. Sweet.
Were you aware of that at all? Have you ever heard of Soul Searchers?
No.
Okay.
No, but you said, but I do love how you said pseudo indie scene. That kind of, because that reminds me of a few things.
Oh, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
What was it? Was it oh my gosh. The Marvel did an imprint that was a pseudo indie Epic, yeah.
All Epic was Epic was created, and this is you'll hear a lot of people talk bad about Shooter. That Shooter was a tyrant. Yeah. Shooter would just overrule everybody, and it was his way or the highway. Shooter is directly responsible for the creation of the Epic imprint. That was his way of giving the people that dedicated themselves to what Marvel wanted to do a chance to get their own things published, because Epic was a creator-owned publication. Similar to Image. It predates Image by 20 years. Or by 10 years. I'm sorry, by 10 years. It predates Image by a decade. And everybody that published, they owned their own stuff. J.M. DeMatteis is probably one of the famous ones. He was an inker and a story writer forever. And he had a 12-issue series that he talked constantly about. And it wasn't until he finally threatened to leave Marvel and go do it somewhere else that Shooter greenlit it and let him publish it. And it did really well. And it's a beautiful book, as all of DeMatteis' stuff is. But yeah, that was all Shooter, man. And that is also a pseudo indie book. It's mainstream, but the creator owns it, which at the time in the early 80s is kind of crazy that you've got that kind of going on.
Well, and I mean, not too crazy, because I mean, you think of it, First Comics, that's what, 1983, Mike Barron's over there with a Badger.
Yep. No, and you've got a lot of up and comers that are, they've got some. Well, if you really want to do this, you got to step back even further, and we're going to go way off track here. We're going off the rails from the Cockrum discussion.
I'm famous for some of this stuff myself.
But yeah, man, if you go back into the late '60s, you get Vaughn Bodie Xeroxing his own papers in the library and stapling them together, and you get Das Kampf. And Das Kampf is arguably one of the first underground indie published books.
Heck yeah.
And then he starts working with Crumb and Bakshi, and they start putting out a bunch of zines. And then you get Wit's End around the same time frame in the late 60s, which is Ditko and Frazetta and a bunch of other guys.
Nice.
Also including, it's all the same people, and it's all the same names. And the reason it's all the same names is because it's really similar to right now. You had creative freedom. Books were selling. A market was open. People were buying them. So, what happens is you're always going to have corporations at the top, but you're going to have artists at the bottom that are trying to do everything they can to stay out of anything that constricts their creative view. And so much like you're seeing the indie scene explode over the last 5 years with crowdfunding becoming an option,
Right.
And especially YouTube and social media, allowing artists to show their art to hundreds of people instead of just being stuck at some booth in the corner by the Pepsi machine in Artist Alley. You're getting that influx, and people are seeing your stuff. You're not sitting at a farmer's market next to apples and dogwood trees, man. You're right there. The people that want to find you are right there. And imagine, if you would, I mean, we've already talked a little bit about what Cockrum did. Imagine if a guy like Cockrum, imagine if a guy like Vaughn Bodie, imagine if some of these greats that we talk about had access to the tools that we have today, and how much more success they would have seen. It completely astounds me every time. And then the corollary is, how is that being squandered today by people that arguably are of nowhere near that talent, but still are showing remarkable success?
True.
Anything else do you have a follow-up? Anything else you wanted to say on that topic before we moved on? Or
Not really, other than man, Bob Layton and Dave Michelini and Dick Giordano. Just, this is a slight tangent for me. I discovered Future comics from the early 2000s, and like I'm totally enamored with those. I'm trying to collect them, get as many of those as possible. I don't know if you've heard of that company.
yeah, they're a good imprint. They had a couple of good books.
Yeah,
Much like a lot of things. And
it was
this is
great.
one, like we were talking about the Iron Man 127 and the resignation letter. That's 79, October of 1979, as mentioned earlier. But moving into the 80s, I mean, you've got ElfQuest with the Paninis,
Hmm.
and then obviously the big flag on the moon that everybody points to when you talk about indie comics is, of course, Eastman and Laird with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the almost literal overnight success that they see.
Hmm.
And then immediately when you see that success, you start getting all the follow-ups. So you get guys that are not coasting off of that wave, but are trying to ride it and go, oh my God, they did it, so I can do this finally. And that's
Yeah.
where you get this explosion. And then out of that explosion arguably becomes Image. And then, it's the same old thing, man. It's the sun got too hot and she burned out. And then you get the late 90s, and the late 90s are the burnout phase.
Yeah.
I don't know a whole lot of people that talk lovingly about books that were published from 96 to 2001.
Yeah.
There's some gems that are in there, but man, it's mostly a graveyard. And then what do you see? You see another resurgence in the early 2000s. You've got Future, you've got Image coming out with the Creech, and that second wave. Even like what we were talking about in the pre-show, Invincible comes out around this time. Walking Dead comes out around this time. That's the thing, is you hit that valley and then you get the peak. And you're always going to see that in any creative endeavor. You're going to see the massive explosion of creativity, and then you're going to see the rider, everybody that wants to coast along behind it. They had success. I can do this too. And then they all jump on. And then the glut of really arguable garbage just
Right.
it pulls everybody down. It pulls the whole market down. It dissuades people from going in.
Yeah.
So
That's true.
I see Alex VRB is making a allusion to a Star Trek reference, and I'm not even going to touch that, man. In fact, I'm disappointed in you. I'm not upset. I'm just disappointed.
All right.
Hail Raiden Radio, though. Raiden Radio. This guy is an absolute trooper. Last week, I could not make it for the live show. He did a pre-record with me. The viewership numbers were brutal. It had nothing to do with him as a guest. He did a fantastic job. I blame it all on me. So moving on. So your book, Chrome Dog, you talked a little bit about how it was influenced by Colossus. Give me a little bit of the background. Like, what were you inspired by? What, we talked a little bit about what Cockrum was inspired by and how that led him down his path. What were you inspired by to do something like this, and how did it evolve? How did it become into being?
So the long and short of it is, I was coming off of a year long tabletop role playing game, being the GM, and it was a sci-fi space opera type setting, that I had created using there's a game called Stars Without Number. It's a sandbox game that's it's a OSR. I don't know if
Okay.
you're familiar with tabletop role playing.
Yeah, so it's based on the D20 open system.
Yeah, but it definitely, like, so you've got D20 for combat rolls, but when it comes to skill checks, it's 2d6, and so
Okay.
it has a like a different different skill. But
And
anyway,
I apologize for everybody in the chat that just got
yeah,
obliterated by the nerd semi that just ran through the show.
so the long and short is I finished the campaign, and I looked at I kind of I looked around and I took stock of the beats that we didn't hit, that I had planned. I had all this campaign prep, and around that time I had discovered EVS, and I'd been a longtime listener of Eric July. He actually helped kind of pull me out of my political leanings into more of now I'm more libertarian for sure. Um, and But I was inspired hearing he was coming out with his book, and then like I said, I found EVS, kind of got plugged into to Comicsgate a little bit, and that was early last year. and and so I'm looking at, and but I don't know where to start, right? So I'm like, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it. So let me see if I can figure out, okay, okay, in order to have a comic book, you got to have a script. So I look up some scripting resources, start writing a script. And as I'm writing the script, I'm developing a character. I wanted to have a character that was like a street level, something like Daredevil or Iron Fist, and so as I'm writing this story with that character, he kind of starts bumping into this other character that's starting to kind of take shape in my brain, who will eventually become Chrome Dog. And I just became fascinated, more fascinated with Chrome Dog than this other character. So I just decided to kind of flesh that out a little bit, and so I approached my artist Luke Stone for a couple of character designs, and we worked on the that initial character, and then we worked on Chrome Dog, and then as we were kind of like vibing off of, we kind of did a character creation session, as it were. He's drawing, and I'm, he's asking for input, and we're just kind of, doing it live basically. um Next thing you know, like Chrome Dog was born in the character design that we see. But I always like, I don't know what it was. I pictured Chrome Dog being this oversized, 7 foot tall, metal, werewolf looking character who, you know, didn't, couldn't control how he looks. Right? He just is. And what do I do with that? Right? But
Hmm.
what I find very striking is aesthetically, when I initially wanted to, when I was considering Chrome Dog, or sorry, Colossus as a base, I hadn't fully considered his demeanor being so similar to how Colossus is as a, as a human being, and how, how noble, how heroic he is, and how he's sticking up for the little guy, and and this and that. And so, Chrome
Do you
Dog kind of
feel
has those.
you kind of replicated that too much? Do you feel that the comparison is too close?
Not even. No. No, no, you're talking about like his attitude, like Chrome Dog's attitude.
Well, I'm just going off of what you were
Yeah.
just saying, that you didn't
No,
realize the.
I think I find it amazing that that it may have just been kind of like latent in my subconscious, as it were. But no, Chrome Dog is definitely, like, there's things that Chrome Dog's doing and will do that Colossus would probably, lay the smack down on him for doing it. Because
Okay.
Chrome Dog, Chrome Dog is he works for criminals. He's a freelancer, so he'll pick up a job doing anything, but he has certain moral lines that he won't cross, and that's where I see he has a similarity to Colossus.
Okay.
um
Was the morality important for you to add that in?
yes.
Was that a prerequisite almost, that whatever you wrote had to have that, or did that come with the character?
No, it that was a like that's a prerequisite. Like he has to have like a strict moral code that's very like uh what's the word? Heroic. I mean, he has to be a hero. At the end of the day, regardless of,
Well, Punisher's a hero, and there's nothing that
well,
Punisher does
but
is,
but
but in our society, Punisher's heralded, man. I mean, I
yeah,
grew up. That was the first book that I jumped over to, right after reading, X-Men and stuff. I jumped right over to Punisher. That was cool. That was awesome.
yeah, but he, by definition he's technically an anti-hero because he doesn't really care if if he takes out the trash, you know what I mean? Like killing bad
Yeah,
guys
but
is not a
but at
big
the
deal.
same time, man, I mean, I'm talking the earlier issues. I'm talking,
Yeah,
this is, I think, the Dixon era.
yeah,
He's protected microchip. This is important to him, and he
mhm,
protects people around him.
mhm,
Yeah, he doesn't care if the bad. He doesn't care if the Reavers die because
right,
they're bad,
right,
but neither does Wolverine.
right,
Wolverine doesn't care. Wolverine doesn't care if he kills Sabretooth. Wolverine doesn't care if he kills a Reaver. He doesn't care if he kills a Sentinel. It's neither does Storm, neither does Cyclops. I really question the anti-hero bent there because
yeah,
it's easy to paint with that brush, but when you
right,
really look at the stories and you read the issues, it's much more. It's not nuanced. It's just it's very plain. That, yeah, I mean, he's not taking an Uzi and mowing down a bunch of bad gangsters in an alleyway. He's being surgical, and
right,
there's moralic heroicness in that. So I was
right.
just kind of like, how does that contrast?
So Chrome Dogs, well, he does I guess one of his lines is he won't kill people. He's not there to kill. So
Okay,
he
so now
he kind
you're
of takes that from Batman in a
right. I
sense.
was gonna say you're on the
Yeah,
Batman track
I'm on the
now.
Batman track. Yes.
Right, and so now the same question comes up that always comes up with Batman. Then is,
Hmm.
how does your hero, um, consciously in your writing, how are you working through that conundrum that you always end up at, which is, I'm not going to kill the person, I'm going to put them in jail, but then I'm relying upon a criminal justice system that is non-reliant, essentially, because
So
the justice system it's a system, and inherently it's flawed because it's manned by men. So how do you justify that?
so that's the trick, right? And that's the fun of being able to tell a story because where we see him in Chrome Dog #1, he hasn't really gotten to a place where he has to test that. Because he's still, straight up freelancer working for he'll work for a mob boss and then he'll also help law enforcement. It's just whoever pays, and whatnot. So he's a gig
Well, if
worker.
he's a moral character,
Right.
how is he helping the mafia? What is the mafia doing that is moral that he'd be willing to work for them with?
He's far too trusting right now. He has a naiveness to him. And he has a there's a what's the word? Um he's doing it for a purpose. Like he's earning money working all these gigs because his body that he lives in, as it were, doesn't he has no need for sleep, so he can work like constantly. So he's every shift, all the time he's either you know um, filling in on on an overnight ferry shift, going across the harbor, right? Or he's working as security at a concert. I mean, it's all these different odd jobs, but but the thing is, he's not a hitman, right? So just even for the mafia, and he doesn't take jobs like so like even though he helps the mob, it's more like casing joints or helping steal things or get intel for an upcoming heist and things like that. That those are the types of jobs that he takes, but he's not like hired muscle, at least not at this point. So the thing is I want to start him in a place where he's very naive to everything that's around him because he doesn't remember who he is. He doesn't remember where he came from. And he has no idea why he's where he's at. he just has this drive and this eagerness to earn this money to donate to this cause. And so it's kind of, we'll get there eventually, but that's part of the fun. That's the hero's journey, right?
Wait, did you find yourself putting that's actually your icon. Look at that.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I did that. Wow. That's show prep, ladies and gentlemen.
I
That's the
love
quality. That's the quality you've come to expect from the gutter, right there.
I just love that image, though. I love the first the cover A, man. Luke Stone knocks it out of the park, and then Edgar, with the colors. It's
Right. So if I could ask a question, and I don't mean this disparagingly, but this looks like kind of weebery. Actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. I do kind of mean that disparagingly. There's a little bit of weebery going on here, man. This little bear thing is what's going on here? What's this guy?
with me. There we go. I think I muted myself.
Oh, sorry.
And it was an inline mute. It's crazy. All right. So so Weebery, huh? No, okay. So what's going on here is Chrome Dog is his day job is working at an amusement park where he dresses up as Wally the Wolf. And he's kind of passing out stuffed animals, plushies and balloons and things to the patrons there. And he's kind of just almost like he's on patrol in a sense. He's watching out for trouble, for things going on. And so as things kind of as he witnesses a mother and her daughter being kidnapped, um, he kind of puts two and two together. He gets his eye off the ball, so to speak, and then he has to. Oh gosh, he's not a furry. He's dressing up like one.
He,
He's
okay,
not. He's
Justin,
dressing up as a mascot.
okay. We might have to stop the show and pause
Okay.
for a moment. When someone asks if your main character is a furry, you answer no.
Okay. Then no, he's
That's
not.
okay. So let's try
Yeah.
this again. All right. So
Yeah.
Mo Biggs has a comment. So is he a furry? Justin, is Chrome Dog a furry?
No, he's not a furry.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we put that to bed. So
Oh,
he's protecting his identity, projecting, doing
kind.
what he can to
Correct.
kind of have a day job while he's doing this. Um,
Mhm.
is he always in the armored up form? Is he always in like full metal mode?
Yes, like there. So that is a shell that his consciousness inhabits.
Okay.
So he's human, right? And of course, we will, that type of that part of the story will unravel in the coming issues. But he is a human consciousness that's been downloaded into this shell of a body that's a killing machine. But he doesn't want to kill, if that makes sense. So I mean, it's kind of a there's like a
Will he kill?
don't know. We'll have to see. Not, I mean, he doesn't want to kill. Is it something that will possibly, that he could accidentally do? Hey, I mean, maybe.
There are some comments in chat from people that I used to respect that I'm not even going to acknowledge, and I'm very disappointed. So when you mentioned specifically in your campaign that Luke
Yeah.
Cage, which is kind of classic Power Man,
Right,
Luke Cage,
right.
as a huge influence. But yet when you were talking about your street level heroes, you
Uh-huh.
kind of you mentioned Daredevil and you mentioned a bunch of others except for Luke Cage.
Right.
Now, there is one stark difference between early Luke Cage and the heroes that you referenced, and that's the brutality aspect. Is Luke Cage responded to crime in a different way than Daredevil ever did. But you cite one on your campaign page, but tonight you referenced the more of the pacifistic Daredevil. in your reference to the character. Is there a corollary there? Is there a contrast? Like was kind of like your creation in the vein of Luke Cage more than Daredevil, but you've in your writing you've dialed them back as the story evolved? Because we all know stories grow themselves, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you start heading down one path, and at the end of the day, you're nowhere near where you thought you were going to end up.
True. So first, the Luke Cage correlation is he's a hero for hire. So he's, he works for the money, for, doing this, doing that, as far as that goes. So that's kind of where that correlation goes for. And plus, he's a heavy, he's larger, I think, than Luke Cage. But what I was saying was, as I was writing that story, it was centered around another character who would be more like Daredevil or Iron Fist. Being similar in martial arts, that kind of thing. That's a different character. And that character encounters this Chrome Dog guy. So as I'm writing that story, Chrome Dog turns out to be kind of like a foil to his, to him, and they both interact with each other as I'm writing in this moment, and I become fixated on Chrome Dog, and so I just run with him.
Gotcha.
So that other character is yet to be revealed. He'll come out soon enough, I'm sure, but he'll have his own story.
So one of the things that when you look at the reboot of X-Men that Dave Cockrum did, he really worked with Claremont on pulling out and exemplifying aspects of those characters, whether you're talking Storm or Nightcrawler, that he personally designed, and then Claremont wove in the story, or Colossus, which was a Claremont character that they needed a heavy, and they kind of worked together and wove that character into it. Did you find that the working relationship with Luke Stone was similar? Did you kind of start off with a base idea of a character, but as you got to work with your artist on that, you saw a blending of ideology, or what has your vision of some of these characters in this book always been firm, and you've always held your ground as a writer?
Characteristically, Luke hasn't really had much to say as far as what the characters, like who they are. But as far as like what they look like on the page, that's what he. I mean, uh, most of what you see here with Chrome Dog came from Luke's imagination with my consent, as it were.
Okay.
But character, as characters, like this is Chrome Dog's my character. Um, he's my creation as far as his, like, who he is. Um, Luke made him kind of like what he is as far as like on the outside. If that makes sense.
Okay, but so you're saying Luke essentially designed just the shell,
Yeah,
pun fully intended,
correct.
of
Correct.
your character, but the essence
Yeah,
is 100% yours. Now
correct.
you did choose to do one thing here, and so this frame, can you or do you want to get into why it is a canine persona?
I was just inspired by my dog. I was out walking my dog, and my first character design, it sounds silly, and who knows, it may show up at some point. But I was thinking of a hero that was like it was a heavy, um, and and he was like a werewolf, right? Except he was tree based. So, and his name would have been Bark, right? So it's kind of a pun, all in
Kind
there.
of. That's
Yeah,
kind of
kind of, yeah. But
that's
so I
just
was
the
thinking,
head of the nail, man.
here's
That's
this, right, right. So he's a werewolf that's like Groot, right, and that kind of thing. But then I was thinking, and he changes from wolf form to this larger whatever. And as I'm walking the dog, I'm just thinking, well, what if he's metal instead, and it just kind of, I'm just pondering on it, and the name Chrome Dog started just bouncing around the back of my head, and it just and then the next thing I know, writing that script, and then he just kind of appears in that moment. in my imagination as I'm writing. So I'm like, okay, who is this guy? What's his story?
Let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah.
You're writing this script. How did
Mhm.
you start writing scripts? What was what was the impetus behind that?
So because I'm a writer by nature. I've been writing since I was a
Right,
kid.
you're a published short story author.
Yeah. Yeah.
But comics, I mean, fiction
Yeah.
is one thing.
Yeah.
Putting a bunch of words on a page
Right.
and building the image in somebody's mental picture of as they're reading
Yeah.
and engaging them and keeping them turning the pages. That's something totally different than doing sequential art scripting.
Right.
Where did you go to translate your knowledge and ability? Because you've sold books, you're a selling author, and
Yeah.
congratulations for that. Because
Well,
as we all know from the Bantam House lawsuit, if you've sold more than 10 books as an independent author, you're doing better than a vast majority of mainstream published authors. So how do you translate that over? How do you translate that ability to tell a story over to the page when you're throwing it at an artist and they're just going to draw it?
okay. So creating the script. Um, what I did was the inspiration came from doing the tabletop role playing, and there's the interplay between me telling the story or presenting the narrative and the players interacting with it has a very I mean, to me, logically, it has a massive similarity to the interplay that happens when you have a person reading a comic book, because you're actually engaged in the story in a way that you're not when you are reading a novel. And even Will Eisner talks about that in his textbooks. And
Yes,
so
no, and I think and I appreciate your answer. You really went with the technical answer, and
okay.
no, that's great. Absolutely, don't take me the wrong way.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome. You get bonus points for effort. I'm saying more along the lines of like, um, you went from a world where you need to use your words to
Hmm.
build the image to you
Right.
need you only really need to supply you can write a paragraph, but the artist is going to ignore everything after the first because they're ADD and they're not going to pay attention to anything you say.
Right.
So, how do you go from spending two paragraphs building the picture and the smells and the sensations and that all of the structure that goes on within a scene? How do you what did you do to learn to break that down to go from fiction to sequential art scripts that you can hand over to an artist and they give you what you want?
I just started. I looked up. I Googled. Comic book scripts and comic book scripting, and there was a few different websites of industry professionals that had put up their the kind of how-to guides, and then I even downloaded a template for Word that allowed me, made it easier to actually like write a script, and then I just made a start of it. And I just kind of felt my way through the darkness of it, as it were, and
Do you find
preparing
any of
the
the
page.
any of the tools that you use to outline a story or structure a story as an author? Do you find any of those tools translate over? I mean, do you do the outline concept? Do you use the note card concept? Do you use the thumbnail concept where you're even in your fumbling writer, sausage fingers, I can't draw worth a shit. Um,
Well,
do you find that you kind of do some of that as you're translating your story over, or is it just you're just following the template?
so it's a little both. So I guess it depends on what mood I'm in, but typically I will plot. So I'll lay down just bullet points of story beats where I want the story to go, or what might sound cool, and so I just jot down a bullet point, and then when I once I get all the way down to the to what I feel is a kind of, I've got my beginning, and then I have my ending, and then I have all these different story beats in between, then I'm like, okay, so I have what could be loosely defined as an outline, even though it's not structured as one. And then I say, okay, so let me see if I can translate this into how many panels is it going to take me to get, or how many pages, I should say, is it going to take me to tell this story beat, and then so on and so on. And so that's there. There is kind of a process, but it's just I just learned it as I'm going. It's not I don't know. Like, to me, it feels natural for me to write this way. But one thing I want to correct about being a published story writer, short story writer, okay. So as a published writer, I don't consider myself an author because I haven't published any books. I've been published in student publications when I was in college. So I want to set the record straight there. Um, so, but having said that, as someone who writes, I feel like this is the best medium to tell my stories. Um, you know, and it feels the most like tabletop role playing without having to need players. I have the pieces, and I can
Right.
just let them go.
Well, okay, I felt a little bit of pushback there. So as a fellow, well, primarily I'm an editor because at the end of the day, I just
Yeah.
don't have the time to, and nor really the inclination. I've got a couple of stories I'd like to tell, but really, honestly, the world isn't going to be better off or not better off whether I do them or not.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. For me personally, I'd love to tell them, but I'd much rather help other aspiring artists, aspiring writers
Yeah.
do their craft. Based off the actual definition of an author, all you have to do is write anything, a poem, a short story.
So
Know,
the word
you,
author to me
the shithouse
brings,
poet is an
yeah.
author. I
Well,
don't.
but the term author, this is just me personally. It brings a certain level of pretentiousness that I don't possess, and so
No, that's been placed upon the term by pretentious assholes that write. Much like like great comic book artist has been placed upon comic book artist by
right.
great pretentious assholes. Not gentlemen like Dave Corkrum that we spoke about earlier, though.
Right.
He was truly a legend.
Yeah.
He did great things. He's single-handedly, arguably responsible for the rejuvenation of the visuals of both the Legion of Superheroes and the X-Men. You don't get Colossus, you don't get Storm, you do not absolutely get Nightcrawler, because that is wholly his creation. Nor do you get the alter ego of Wolverine, Logan, which did not exist before Cockrum came in. So you have the laundry list is it could be read ad infinitum. It's impressive. But as we close out here for the evening, Justin, it's been a pleasure having you in the gutter. This is not a place you want to stay, though, my friend. Do you have any thoughts?
Um. I mean, I don't really know what to.
No, and that's fine. The link for Chrome Dog is in the description. Please check it out. This has been the Gutter, and I appreciate all of you fine gentlemen and ladies.
Thanks for having me.
For showing up. You're welcome, sir. Whether you are appreciative of being here or not is up to you. It usually takes a little bit of time.
Okay.
But everybody kind of finds that they enjoy it because everybody ends up here eventually.
In the gutter.
Try some new Minute Maid orange tangerine. It's got calcium.
Then I'm not drinking it.
Oh, no, it's sweet. You'll like it.
I don't believe you.
Well, then who would you believe?
I don't know, Robert Loggia. Whoa, Robert Loggia.
Billy, your mother's right. New Minute Maid orange tangerine tastes great. And it's got as much calcium as milk.
If you say so, Mr. Loggia.
Yeah.
This is great.
Enjoy your breakfast.
New Minute Maid orange tangerine with calcium.
Yeah.
I only have to play that because I'm obligated to play it every fifth show because it's the greatest orange juice commercial that's ever been made.
Like that kid would even know who Robert Loggia is.
Nobody knows who
I
Robert
didn't
Loggia
know
is.
who he
The first time I played it, I had half my chat
know
going
that.
like,
I
"Who's
know the
Robert
actor,
Loggia?"
right.
Yeah, exactly. In any case, thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for sitting through the Robert Loggia orange juice commercial. And I guarantee half of the people that enjoyed that are currently going, you know what? I need to get some orange juice because that's how good of a salesman Robert Loggia is. Have a wonderful night. Thank you for joining us. Just in case Sweets, Chrome Dog is on Indiegogo right now. Go check it out. Huge fan of everything that's awesome. Justin, do you have any final words?
Yes. All of the tiers that were on Indiegogo are now currently available on the Fund My Comic campaign. So we're simultaneously campaigning. So, and
Fantastic.
we also will have once Luke gets to the pages, we're actually going to have some traditional art that's going to be going up for as a tier on the Fund My Comic campaign just as soon as we get those up and at it. So
Sounds good, man. Well, hey, thanks for joining me this evening.
yes, sir.
And look forward to having you again. Maybe you'll come back to the gutter.
Yeah, why not?
We'll see.
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days, man, the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.